Hey everybody, it's your old pal, Sleaze Grinder from the pages of Classic Rock Magazine, the Advanced Demonology Podcast, the Heavy Leather Universe, etc., etc. Okay, so a couple things. I want to talk about a record, and I also want to talk about a book. I have decided, I don't know why, but I have decided to reread all the books in my library, which is a daunting task. I have about 1,000 of them. So it's probably going to take me 3 or 4 years, but I'm going to come here and talk about some of the highlights with you as I go along. So I'm going to be doing that today. But first, I want to tell you about this record that I've been listening to all weekend, much to my dog Archie boy's chagrin, who goes into a panic every time I play it. So I've been doing it a lot on the headphones, but it sounds great on the stereo. This is the record. The band is called My Wife's an Angel. And you go, well, how you get that name? Dude was sitting in his living room trying to figure out the name of his band, writing down names, sitting there with his wife. He's like, hey, what's a good name for a band? She said, My Wife's an Angel. She's goof. But, he's like, you know what? That's good. Let's do it. And that's what happened. This is they're a band from Philadelphia. And they've been known basically to being a noise punk band, which is probably true. Seems a little reductive. I feel like they contain multitudes. If I was going to compare them to another band, which is what you have to do when you're a rock journalist, I would say Flipper or Butthole Surfers. They don't sound like the 80s. Obviously, both of those bands sound very 80s. This band, I think, pulls some stuff from there, but it's its own thing. It's now. It's right now. It's Gen Z or whatever the fuck it is. I really like it. It is, first of all, the singer is a talk singer, which I always appreciate. I love a good talk singer. I wish all singers could be talk singers. This guy does it. Sometimes he is just threatening people, which I also enjoy. I love it when a singer threatens me through my speakers, so that's fun. And it rocks. That's the thing. It just rocks, man. And I'm going to try to play a little something underneath. I don't know how popular they are, so I don't know if I'm going to get a copyright notice. I believe they did have a flexi on Decibel, so they must be, does that make it big? I don't know. Anyway, this is their second record. The first one came out last year. This one came out very recently. It's called Keep Honking, I'm About to Fucking Kill Myself. It's a pretty great title. And one thing that I really like on this record is that they have this song about this guy Marvin, and they're giving Marvin the business. Marvin, get the fuck on the phone. Is this the basic lyric in the lyrical theme? Marvin, get your fat ass on the phone. And the funny thing about it is, look, they put Marvin's phone number right on the song, so you can call Marvin and tell him to get his fat ass on the phone. That's pretty great. So I don't know. This might be one of my top records of the year. It's My Wife's an Angel with Keep Honking. I'm about to fucking kill myself. Okay, so the book that I want to talk to you about, it's this one right here. It's called Down and In, A Life in the Underground. It's by Ronald Sukenik. There's Ronald in the back. And this one, along with another book that I'll talk about later, called History by John Leland, I think are mandatory tomes if you want to know what's up. That's been my lifelong pursuit. I've just always wanted to know what was going on. And so the history of subculture and the underground, the idea of the cultural underground, has always been an interest of mine. And this dude, you know that song, the LCD Sound System song, I'm Losing My Edge, where he's like, I'm losing my edge, but I was there. I was there at the first Can concert. I was there at the first Suicide rehearsal. This guy, Sukenik, he really was. He was like the Zelig of the underground hipster scene in New York. So he came around in the 50s. He's a New York City kid. His dad was a dentist, so he was able to explore his creativity without being forced into labor. So he goes through a lot of different underground subcultures in this journey that we all go on with him. And it starts with the tail end of the the hipsters of the silent generation, which were guys like Dylan Thomas, who it turns out would have been a very #MeToo guy, He was around today. And Jackson Pollock, guys like that. And then this guy's super contemporaries were the Beats, which I found the most fascinating part of this book. The Beats, because I think it's the one subculture, all the various ones that he went through, that I think had the least cultural impact. Probably because, I mean, a little bit, William Burroughs obviously broke through. People still, hipsters still read Junkie today. Hipsters still read Owl by Allen Ginsberg and On the Road by Jack Kerouac. But I think a lot of the other people in that milieu have gone on to obscurity, probably because there wasn't whole lot of diversity. I mean, the entire roster of the Beats was, white, middle to upper class, intellectual men. I mean, that was it. So it's not going to speak to everybody, but they did have a lot of great art came from that. And what I liked about them was the idea was if you were a Beat, you were also going to be a creator of some kind. You were going to be a poet. You were a writer. You were an artist. You're a sculptor. You had some creative contribution that you're bringing to the table. And Sukanik was talking about when the hippies came in, they didn't have that. They were just really there for the party. So they weren't bringing anything to the culture. I like the idea of you having to contribute if you want to be part of my fucking cool underground scene. And the other thing, too, is the whole concept of being hip, of being in the know. I mean, they all read each other's books and went to each other's gallery showings and poetry readings and all that kind of stuff. They were the definition of hip because they knew what was going on. That's one of the things that's funny about this book, especially in the Beats part, because like I said, a lot of these people fell into obscurity. They were a big deal at the time, but maybe not so much anymore. And so he's always like going into a bar, right? Or a coffee house, and he talk about who was there. And it's always like, oh man, everybody was there. Frosty Myers was there. Larry Zox was there. Jerry Zember was there. Huntington Hartford was there. And you're like, sir, who the fuck are these people? It's pretty funny. But if you were really hip, you'd know who all those people are. Anyway, it goes through the folk coffee house kind of stuff, and then the whole like yippie thing. There was like the activist wing of the hippie movement with Abby Hoffman and guys like that in the Fugs. And there's a great story. The East Village Other was the popular alternative newspaper at the time, and they had some static with an activist group that was around at the time called the Against the Wall motherfuckers, and the motherfuckers show up with canes to beat up journalists, and they would set the scene for this battle. And then Spain Rodriguez, the underground cartoonist who created Zodiac Mindwarp and Trashman, comes bursting through the window with an axe. I guess he carried an axe wherever he went, and melee ensued. There's a lot of stories like that. Everybody was pretty fucking nuts through this thing. And of course, then it goes to CBGBs and Warhol and Velvet Underground and then punk rock and all that kind of stuff. It is, to me, a masterclass in how to know what the fuck is going on. This book came out in 1987. I read it when it came out, and I remember the idea of being well read really resonated with me. Like, how could you know what's going on? How could you be hip if you don't read, man? So, during that time, I read up on everything that guys like this would tell you was hip. I just felt like he's going to help me because I was going to see the other hipsters and we were going to be able to talk about literature. That literally never happened. I'm not sure I ever talked about books with anybody when I was 18 years old. But I was ready, and I still feel like you got to read books to be hip. Anyway, if you want to get hip, I suggest you read Down and In by Ronald Sukanik. By the way, he was also a very unsuccessful beat writer, but it's not always about success. Sometimes it's just about, he was saying in one part, I'll leave you with this. He said in one part that I thought was a brilliant line. He said, I prefer the tiger of pleasure to the oxen of consistency. Me too, man.